Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Ian Bruce and this is Interviews from Quito, the programme where we explore some of the big challenges facing this country and the region. In today's programme, Julian Assange versus the state of Ecuador. After 6 years of asylum inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London, the founder of Wikileaks is taking legal action against Ecuador for not respecting his rights. Why? How did it come to this? And what comes next for the world's most famous whistleblower? To talk about this, we're pleased to have with us Carlos Poveda. He's Julian Assange's legal representative here in Ecuador. But first, let's take a look at this video.
According to Wikileaks, the Ecuadorian government has partially lifted the communication ban on its founder, Julian Assange. Assange's phone and internet connection are being restored and he will also be allowed to receive visitors. The government had cut his communications 7 months ago, alleging that Assange was interfering in Ecuador's foreign relations. He has been confined to the embassy in London for over 6 years. Assange is now suing the government of Ecuador. This is for alleged violations of his rights. Ecuador released a new protocol which requires Assange to pay for medical bills and phone calls, among other utilities. Assange's lawyer, Baltasar Garzón, says his client was not consulted on these new house rules.
We believe that the protocol violates fundamental rights. It limits the exercising of the right to a defense. It affects the privacy of people that don't have anything to do with the process beyond the possibility of them spending some time with or being with the affected person. And as such, what we are asking the judiciary is that it tells us whether or not this is correct and the possibility of reversing the existing situation. And above all, that the lack of communication should immediately cease.
Thank you for being with us, Carlos. Let's begin with the legal action that you and Baltasar Garzón have opened against the Ecuadorian state on behalf of Julian Assange. What exactly are you seeking?
Thank you very much for this interview. What we are seeking are the vindication of rights. This action technically is known as a protection action, a constitutional protection, where we must prove the violation of essential rights provided in the Constitution. Two important aspects. The first, the interference of communication in isolation since March this year. And the second topic is the effectiveness of a special protocol that provides more restrictions than he has at present. So first, we want telecommunications to be reinstated, visits to be reinstated, and access of the legal team, as well as annul the special protocol.
In detail in a moment, but first, in general, what is the situation for Julian Assange like now, after 6 years in such a small space?
As you can imagine, 6 years of complete isolation, a situation where the arbitrary tensions group of the United Nations has declared this as an inhumane treatment for the conditions he lives in.
Somebody who doesn't know it, explain exactly what the situation is there. I actually went to visit him in 2012, so I can see it myself, but for the viewers, just describe what it's like.
The space is very small. It's an embassy in the center of London, but the rooms inside are very small. The access to bathrooms, for example, is reduced. He doesn't have a possibility of receiving natural light because physical space is limited, and 6 years in those conditions, you may imagine how he is. Unfortunately, there has been huge misinformation. He doesn't live as a king or somebody who has advantages. It's quite calamitous. I have been able to prove inside they don't have modern facilities. It's the embassy inside is old. The spaces are small. Therefore, in these conditions, you can imagine how he is. In January 2018, there was an interdisciplinary group that carried out medical examinations, and of course he is affected. He had to access dentistry services. He wasn't able his situation, a psychological situation, also undermines him. He is not altered, as some media has said, but of course he is undermined because of the environment and restrictions of rights now.
But has he suffered any illnesses?
He has had some medical situation on his left, on his shoulder or teeth. He couldn't, he wasn't examined. His access to physicians also, people are restricted to see him because of the repercussions. So it's not only a direct restriction, but also indirect. The imposition of protocols on top.
Right? He has no fresh air.
The fact you can walk at least one block, which is a natural space for us, you go from your work to your home, or you go and buy something, that would be elementary. But he can't do that. He has an electric walker that is there, but is not the same. You walk on a device that is in a small room. You can't even have change from another environment. The most common, I would like to receive natural light. Anybody arrested in Ecuador have access at least 5 minutes in the highest risk. They can talk with the cell peers. Here he doesn't even have that possibility. This isolation seems more a very high security arrest.
In most prisons.
Worse. This is why I'm talking about high security regime, because the protocol has restricted visits. If you want to visit Julian Assange, you have to give out your data, you have to leave your cell phones, your passport, and it depends on the diplomatic official if you can enter or not. But they can even copy your passport. Our iPhones and passport, we don't know if they were altered, but passports were scanned and even high-risk profiles were made. The lawyers, we are professionals devoted to defend our clients. Not talk about individuals. This is imposed by the special protocol, and they don't have to allow you to enter.
Or in fact, what's happened this year? Because just describe to me what happened at the end of last year, the beginning of this year, March, and now with the new protocol in terms of restricting his conditions.
We believe that all these facts show a radical position of the state that has changed from protection to persecution. And I tell you this because the protocol, which is almost the summit of rights, was not even a consensus of the minimum thing. The person has to follow rules of conduct, but you have a human being inside, and if you have a human being that needs to follow rules, you should agree with him. If the protocol rules all activities, what would happen in case of fire? The protocol doesn't rule that. How about if a physician doesn't want to examine? What would be an alternative? What would happen if the diplomatic delegation changes its seat in December? If the protocol regulates all conduct, there are many missing. But the most serious thing is that any transgression to the protocol ends the asylum, so it's a sanction. We wonder if there's a due process before the asylum concludes. There should be at least a summary trial for him to present his evidence, because it's a sanction. That is the protocol, and this is the matter of our concern. So this is a way of diplomatically ending the asylum.
So before January or the beginning of this year, he had more or less free visits for people he wanted. Then they stopped visits completely, and now he has controlled visits. Is that correct?
There have been these three spaces you are talking about. It's not that there was never control. There was always control. There were always tacit rules because there are cohabitation rules. Of course, the rules, somebody who asks for asylum is a guest. Nobody can flee from a house's rules. Later, with the telecommunication and visit restriction, this is worse yet regarding family legal matters. This is why I tell you that our attorneys appear as high-risk profiles. This is how they treat us. I'm an attorney. I'm Ecuadorian. I am defending Julian Assange because of his Sweden cooperation treaty. Each time I travel, they ask additional things to me. I understand now why they established this and now much more. You don't have the freedom of saying the attorney Poveda is visiting Assange. That goes through the chief of a diplomatic mission, and he says if I can appear or not. If Julian's friend goes, he could do it, but now with this new rules, they say that they reserve the right of admission. So this is not only for visitors, but also for Assange. His pets, for example, they have said something deliberate for the pet. He has to deliver it to an institution. If you don't have contact with people, at the least you have a contact with the pet. But even that, so you notice what they've done. And finally, as of December, they will pay some items. So we imagine that it was made to conclude the asylum with a justification of a protocol.
The question of communications. Before he had more or less free access to the internet, then it was cut, and now it's been re-established partially. Is that adequate?
No tiene.
No, he doesn't have it. An information that was not verified was issued. He does not have any internet. 1 week and a half ago, somebody said it was re-established, but we verified and it's not so.
Allowed access to the internet.
But it wasn't reinstated. They can say what they want. And this is why we have filed the protection action. We have to clarify this in media. Assange is a journalist. He is not a hacker. Unfortunately, there is the hostility of the media, and now he's humiliated. And even legal exercise is criticized. It's not easy to defend him. The matter is complex, but we have to defend his rights because he's a human being and because there's dignity.
He was engaging in political activity. He was interfering with Ecuador's diplomatic relations with other countries. Is that a fair point?
And
how can they prove the veracity of that information? When certain information are filtered, they blame personnel that has nothing to do, like Catalonian independence, people who have never met with Catalonian people. These are informations that are not correct, and unfortunately, in my criteria as Ecuadorian, we live in a state of opinion. The state makes its regulations based on an editorial or news. It reacts in this way, and the state of opinion is very serious because it doesn't verify its acts upon truth, but upon public opinion, and this is what is happening in this case. If you see there is a public opinion against, we acknowledge that, and all actions that are being argumented depends on what the public opinion. And this is serious because this is about human rights. It's a topic of dignity.
So how would you like to see the protocol changed? Concretely, what changes would you like?
There are 32 provisions. We have more than 30 observations, which is an anecdote. Foreign Minister Valencia said this was when Valencia said that we have the legal and judicial support, when Foreign Minister tells me about judicial support, I would understand that he has judges' support. It seems that they haven't noticed his declarations made on Friday after we filed the protection action. So I wonder, where is judicial independence? Why will we attend a trial when we know that Foreign Minister has the support of the judges? We feel affected. I hope this was a mistake in information. But of course, if we have observations to the protocol, we want that the protocol be suspended to discuss it. It's rules of conduct. I demand he take about 3 weeks, 3 times a week. Yes, I would like 4 times a week. I want to have my pet. Allow me to have my pet. I want to have frequent visits. He's a journalist. I wonder, a journalist is taking internet away from a journalist. Can it work? No.
What should be because there's a tension there, isn't there, between being a journalist and being in asylum, in diplomatic asylum inside an embassy. How should that balance be struck?
The
thing is that this is an emblematic case for you, because what was the background of Assange to be in the situation he is in, going against power, proving that there are situations beyond we as citizens see and observe. That was the brave and his merit. And the fact of powers react, it's not as having you here in front, but they're behind. And of course, that is the cost of a journalist committed with truth has. Therefore, the colleague that is making a cruel and hostile critique should think that he could also undergo the same, not only persecution. There are peers who have been murdered. What happens with them? This is such an emblematic case that it's not only Mr. Assange, it is the exercise of freedom of expression and all the rights we deserve as citizens, because our opinion is based on what you inform, and silence someone who has been critiqued without the system is silence us. Impose a protocol to silence him is imposing a prior censorship. This is why we have to value and defend, not only believe. I deem that the hostile attitude are based to the fact that former President Correa granted asylum, and anything that smells to Correa has to be confronted.
The Ecuadorian government, the government of President Lenin Moreno, is under pressure from outside to adopt these new measures, or is it their own initiative?
No creo que sea iniciativa propia.
I don't think it's his own initiative. If it were, they would respect the parameters, as Foreign Minister Valencia said. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights issued in May 2018 the Regulation 025 that tells you what happens with refugees and asylum grantees. We have this moment, the border in Guatemala and Mexico. This protocol was made for them, not only for Ecuadorians. I asked Foreign Minister Valencia if he said that he can homologize the protocol. The consultative opinion says that before asylum you are entitled to an interview to elaborate and analyze the imminent risk you have against your life. That provision is not contained on the special protocol, so the question is, why isn't it? He said he homologized it. The due process is asylum is terminated. The minimum thing you need is right to defense, and you don't have it. So what international standard is he talking about? It suggests that there are impositions because we need commercial opening, market opening, but if we see it critically, we see that that doesn't come free. It comes with certain conditions. Why the UK, after he was arrested by, could assure we would not extradite him to the United States, a country where his integrity would be at risk. It doesn't say, it would be one line. Why did the Ecuadorian government insist on the safeguard? Why have we forgotten the safeguard? And a final answer, if they are so disturbed by Assange at the embassy, why doesn't the Ecuadorian government open the door and make him leave? He doesn't have that possibility because he blames Assange and the legal group. He doesn't do it because he knows there is international protection and that there is responsibility on the life of Assange.
Julian Assange's legal situation in Britain now, because the case against him in Sweden was dropped. So what is his situation now? What happens if he steps outside the door?
El caso de Suecia, los dos casos fueron archivados.
In Sweden, both cases were dropped. When they said he was a raper, they didn't have any proof, and they took so long that we're not talking about those crimes anymore. The current situation, due to lack of appearance, because he had to appear before British authorities, he committed a light infringement. The moment he leaves, British authorities must arrest him and try him. And he would have a 3 months arrest, 3 to 6, because it's a very light infringement. But in that time, investigations could be activated in the United States. It has at least 3 cases against the Spanish law. And in these 3 months, they could place charges and reactivate the case in the United States. And that part is, this is why we are struggling the right to asylum, because it's the obligation of the recepting state to do it.
Be giving the impression that it's trying to get rid of Assange. You know, Lenin Moreno called him an inherited problem. But they don't seem to have succeeded. As you say, they could have just opened the door and told him to go, but they haven't done that. Why not?
Eso sería lo más sencillo.
That would be the simplest thing. There's a hostile mass of people who wants that. Open the door and let him go. That is an opinion that is general these days. And what is Assange demanding the state? Like if a human being cannot feel uncomfortable in a foreign another house, we have reached the extreme to feel somebody has no value or dignity and must bear anything because he's in another house. But why does the Ecuadorian state limit? Because it knows that he still has international protection. It's not that Assange has no alternative. It is Ecuador that doesn't have any alternative.
Just a month ago or so, everybody thought there was going to be something was going to happen. There was going to be some kind of a solution. Nothing. What happened?
We would have to ask the state. There are many questions that we should make the Ecuadorian state. They ask many things to us, but the answers are in the government, the state, the legal team and its group of attorneys. We are not state. We propose solutions, but we don't give them because in case of asylum, that is a problem between states, between Ecuador and the UK. It also involves the United States. They don't want to know anything. They don't want to appear in this spectrum. But it's not the legal team that gives a solution. The safeguard. This is a state problem, and therefore the Ecuadorian state should have given initiatives. We have an instance of International Justice Court. What happened there? A state is entitled to give a safeguard, and they could have demanded to the International Court of Justice. It is 6 years. Perhaps in 6 years we already had an answer, but nothing was done.
What does Julian Assange want to happen? What solutions do you think are possible?
I think that the solutions are less and less, but time is also exhausting. I think that even if a human being is in danger, it's a matter of dignity. If you reduce dignity, he will take a decision even if there's risk. But that decision is also connected with the responsibility of our country. because it was the Ecuadorian state that received him. It could be an inherited problem, but it's effective because it is the state that granted asylum, not the government. The state in a sovereign way. Of course, a human being cannot receive more aggression than what Assange is receiving. This must conclude sometime. Unfortunately, if it ends damaging the human being and the Ecuadorian state, would be the worst case.
Carlos. Very interesting. We've been talking to Carlos Poveda, the lawyer for Julian Assange, about his current situation and his dispute with the Ecuadorian government. Thank you very much for watching Interviews from Quito. I'm Ian Bruce. Until next time.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud, amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.